Well, there's a certain number of people throughout history who really had an effect, an impact on the course of human civilization. And Nikola Tesla, in my book, was one of those people. The New Jersey Antique Radio Club is fortunate tonight to have as our guest presenter someone who's actually met Mr. Tesla, and in fact is a relative of his closest living relative. So if we could welcome Mr. William Terbo, our guest speaker tonight. He's going to tell us a little bit about one of my heroes, Nikola Tesla.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak relatively extemporaneously because I just made a few notes of things that we used. I think the first, in preparation for a radio interview I did just a couple days ago of people who know nothing about Tesla, I made some notes, but a couple of them still pertain today. But I assume that everybody in this room has at least a passing idea of who Nikola Tesla was, because particularly if you're interested in radio, you're familiar with his advances in radio. Of course, radio is one of the two principal things that he's responsible for, in addition to numerous other inventions. But of course, he's considered the father of alternating current because his group of patents established the motors, the generators, and the transmission system all in one group. Let me first, just so that we know exactly who Tesla was and where he came from. And if you'll excuse me, I'll just read what is appropriate so that we know that part of his background. First, he was the son of a Serbian Orthodox priest. He was born in 1856 in the small town of Smiljan in the military frontier county of Lika in the Austro-Hungarian province of Croatia. The reason I say military frontier, in the time that Tesla was born and for 300 or 400 years before that, that was the border between the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or Austrian Empire at that time, and the Ottoman Empire. And the military frontier was a place where principally Serbs had been relocated to defend that border, which they did. It made a very hardy group of people, as you can see from the height of them. The 6 feet is considered short in that area. He was educated in Graz and in Prague, and he worked in Budapest and in Paris. In 1884, when he was 28 years old, he came to America, where he did the creative work on which his fame is really based. When he was in Paris, he worked for, he was already known as a electrical wizard at that time. In fact, even when he was in school, he got in some trouble because one of his professors in Prague was considered a real authority on electricity, and Tesla had the temerity to contradict him as to some element of the potential of the generators that the professor was talking about, and the professor did not like that at all, but Tesla survived. How he happened to work when he was in Paris was with the Edison European department in Paris. And the general manager of that department, who was a colleague and friend of Edison, gave Tesla a recommendation to Edison in this country when he came. And that recommendation said, "Dear Tom, I know of only two great geniuses in this world. You are one, and you're speaking to the other." And so it was quite a recommendation that he had. His work with Edison, which only lasted about a year, was pretty rocky. Tesla already had in his mind the concept of alternating current. He was thinking he could work with Edison, and immediately persuade Edison to support the development of alternating current, but of course that wasn't the way it was going to be. His work in that first year that he worked with Edison was simply refining the design of alternating current or direct current generators, which he did with great sophistication and grace. However, there's sort of a tale that Edison, in order to inspire him to work beyond the 20 hours a day that he was supposed to work, said that if you can solve these problems that he had with his generators, I'll give you $50,000. Tesla then worked like a maniac to solve the problems and said, here they are. Where's my $50,000? And Edison supposedly said, my dear Nikola, you don't understand the American sense of humor. in which case he then said, we can part ways. I'll say that Nikola Tesla is revered as a national icon in all parts of the former Yugoslavia, but he's really fanatically adored by Serbs. He's treated like a deity or a king or anything you want to name by Serbs. But even though he did his work in this country, all of his work, essentially all of his creative work in this country, he's still claimed as native son by Serbs, by Croats, by Austrians, by Hungarians, and many others, all claiming him to. I don't mind that at all. I think the more the merrier. It's nice. In fact, when I first went to Yugoslavia, I was shocked by the reception that I got. I went as honored guest of the country with Isidore Rabi, the Nobel Prize winner, and Madame Wu, who held the... Actually, I went to present a paper at the Michael Pupin Symposium, who happened to be a friend of my father, and I felt that I heard Pupin's name in my home just about as much as I'd heard Tesla. And so I went to present a paper, but I was really shocked by the reception I got there because Tesla is treated like a god in those places. My father's name was Nikola Trbojevich. My name is Terbo. That's what happens when you have an American mother of English background. They shorten up the name. My father never changed his name. He already was famous when he married my mother, and his patents are all in the name Trbojevich, but I was born with this social name. And it suits me fine because it's absolutely unique. I've looked in phone books throughout the country and never found another Terbo. However, in Yugoslavia, you can find lots of Trbojeviches. My father was an inventor also. As I mentioned, I'm talking to somebody here who's an automobile fanatic, and I was born and raised in Detroit because my father's inventions were, he was one of the principal inventors in gears. He invented the hypoid gear that appeared in essentially every rear-wheel drive car from 1930 onward, and every sort of steering gear, constant velocity, universal joints, constant displacement pumps and things, about 200 patents worth. But he was obviously a nephew of Tesla. My grandmother was Angelina, or Angelina if you prefer, Angelina Tesla, the sister of Nikola Tesla. And you'd think with, it's a clerical family. You know, in that part of the time, families who had access to education were either nobility, which there is no nobility in Yugoslavia or Serbia. There is a king, but there's really no nobility. Or they were in the military, or in government, or in clerical, in the priesthood, Serbian Orthodox priesthood. So my father has exactly the same background as Nikola Tesla, just 30 years displaced. He was born in the same area, very same area. I mean, the families knew each other, obviously, as my grandmother was Tesla's sister. And he came to this country at 28 years old, same as Tesla did. He worked in Budapest he was educated both in gymnasium and university in Budapest. Worked for the telephone company in Budapest. This is like 1910. Same as Tesla had worked before. Tesla worked for the electrical company, but at that time that was the same thing, and came to this country. And so I like to think that I have probably a better grasp about the personality of Tesla because I see that personality reflected in my father. Question is, what distinguishes Tesla from other famous inventors? And I think there are a couple things that come to my mind. First, he was in that group of independent inventors which almost disappeared after the turn of the century when corporate invention took over. He was maybe one of the youngest of that group, which works both ways. It works both good for a person being younger and in the flow of this tremendous increase in technology. It also works against you because you overlap into this corporate age of invention, and it made things very difficult for Tesla in his later life to raise the kind of money he needed to really prove some of his developments. The other thing that separates him, and I can name any number of those type of inventors. You can name the Whitney and Howe and Bell and the Wright brothers. Tesla really was responsible for two seminal inventions. One was this whole packet of patents that developed alternating current, and the other one was for the foundation of what would be what you can call now as the access to the modern radio. You can take your pick of whatever patents you want to say, but tuned circuits, his concept of tuned circuits was what made modern radio more possible. Of course, besides those things, he had a tremendous breadth of other inventions. His Tesla coil, all the way from, say, Tesla coil, which is a high-frequency type of operation, to bladeless turbines. He even had patents for VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Some of these, one of the sort of facets of Tesla was that he had a tremendously inventive mind. In his later days, he still was inventing, but he wasn't financially able to prove. He always said that he has great ideas that require great amounts of money to prove. And when his finances turned bad because of the tower in Wardenclyffe, that it was sponsored by J.P. Morgan, but I tell you the story about it. Why did J.P. Morgan sponsor? In fact, it's interesting because Tesla supplanted in Morgan's investment scheme, supplanted Thomas Edison. I think there were a number of reasons. First, Edison was a very sloppy guy. He only washed under duress, I guess. And if you recall that J.P. Morgan was a real aristocrat, and Tesla presented himself, particularly after because he came from that background, a gentleman-type background, particularly when he became established, he also presented himself as a very proper gentleman, and I think there was a connection there. But that was only one of the reasons. The other one was that I think J.P. Morgan recognized that Edison was stuck with direct current, and I'll discuss that a little bit later about this war of the currents. But he saw in Tesla somebody whose mind was jumping ahead, and he thought, Tesla told him it was possible. Tesla knew it was possible. I can transmit signals over great distances without any difficulty. Morgan, thinking all the time, being a great financier, such a great financier that he actually was the balance between collapse and continuation in the American government. He said, wouldn't it be nice if I could get the stock market results from London before anybody else got them? He didn't tell Tesla this precisely, and I don't know that Tesla, being such a altruistic type of fellow, was thinking in those terms at all. He was thinking maybe how humankind could be improved by such communications. And so he supported Tesla to build this enormous tower on Long Island, what's called Wardenclyffe. Now you call it Shoreham. And Tesla then said, that's too simple to just transmit signals. I'm going to try to transmit power without the wires, which is maybe 3-4 orders of magnitude more complicated than the signals. And while he was fooling around trying to his idea was, how can I show it? In 1893, George Westinghouse and Tesla really astounded the world by lighting the Chicago World's Fair, Century Fair in Chicago. He said, wouldn't that be nice if I could do the same thing to light the Paris exposition with my electricity from the United States? Well, while he was doing this, Marconi got his little signal across. The object that Morgan had of getting information from Europe disappeared, and he withdrew his support. and it was nearly completed, and Tesla then took his own money to complete it, and he really ran out of money before it got properly completed. So much for that kind of operation. I think one thing that's always interesting to ask, you know, the center of science in the time of Tesla, which is, he was born in 1856, so you're talking about 1880 through the First World War. The center of science and of technology really was in Germany at that time. But why did people come to the United States, particularly people from the Balkans? And I mentioned Michael Pupin, or Pupin. In our family, we called him the English way, Pupin. In Yugoslavia, they called him Pupin, who invented the telephone repeater. And when he sold it in 1900, I believe it was, he sold it for $1 million to the Bell telephone, which at that time, $1 million, a real $1 million, not you know, converted to modern times. That was the most money that had been paid for a patent in the history until that time. And it was quite a time after that before anybody else got $1 million for a patent. But why did people like Tesla and Pupin come to the United States? Well, they both came from what ultimately would become Yugoslavia. They both were Serbs from this military frontier area. But if you look back in history in Europe, you'll see that the population of the world changed enormously. To give you an example, 300 million people in the world. It took 300 years to go from 300 million people to 600 million people, that happened around 1700. And it took another while to double that again. So that meant that then in great parts of Europe, and particularly in the Balkans, land was empty. There were no people. The three things that sort of generated the impetus for people to leave from the Balkans, from what would now be Yugoslavia or Serbia particularly, are the three dates. I'll just say the three. The Battle of Kosovo, which was, you hear so much now because of this trouble in Kosovo. That was in 1389. This was what caused the Ottomans defeated the Serbs at that time and forced them to move north, essentially displacing them from where they had been before. The second date, which is important, is 1453. That's when Constantinople fell to the Turks, which removed from those people who followed the Eastern Rite of the Church, the Serbian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, whatever Orthodox you want to say, that took away the center of that type of religion and dispersed it somewhat. And then was the high watermark of the Ottoman Empire, and that was in 1683. That's when Jan Sobieski took 25,000 troops from Krakow, 1,000 miles to defend Vienna in the second siege of Vienna. If there are any Polish people here, you got somebody that did something really spectacular. He did two things spectacularly. He came 1,000 miles from Krakow to defend Vienna. When he defended Vienna and actually turned back the Ottoman Empire, he went back to Poland, which is unusual because normally he'd say, okay, I did this, I'm going to sit here in Vienna forever. By 1699, all Hungary was free of Ottoman Empire. And what this means is that the area where the Ottoman Empire was still in place was in turmoil. And if you wanted a higher education, you weren't going to get it there. You went someplace else. Tesla went to Austria. My father went to Hungary. Other people went to other places. And they were detached from their home. And they saw the potential in the American experience as a place to fulfill their dreams of whatever they would have. So I'm just saying that is why so many people of talent left those areas, because the potential to do things in those areas, the Ottoman Empire, particularly toward the end, was a very conservative empire, and it was a good place to get out of. So that's why people came to this country, both from the level of Tesla and from regular people. there was a tremendous immigration to this country. In the United States, of course, he worked with Edison. After he left Edison, his genius was already being recognized by people. Unfortunately, the first people that recognized it started the Tesla Electric Company, a bunch of promoters, and to do arc lighting. And they did arc lighting. They sold a lot of stock, and as Tesla said later, all he got out of it was plenty of stock certificates to use as wallpaper. And it was only when he then was able to get some support for his laboratory to start his work on alternating current, which ended in this whole group of patents that were so important. Tesla had difficulty with a number of people. He had difficulty with Edison. He respected Edison because Edison was obviously a very inventive type of person. He had the first of the corporate inventing system. But he had obviously great difficulty with Marconi because Marconi was given the original priority in the radio, which Tesla knew was with his patents. But he had an excellent relationship with George Westinghouse. Such a relationship that I'm sorry to say, I wish it weren't quite that good a relationship. George Westinghouse paid handsomely for this group of patents that Tesla had because he wanted to get out of the air brake business. He already had an electrical company. He was buying up patents for other people that were making direct current and alternating current machinery, but they were really very primitive in that respect. But with Tesla, he found somebody who had an entire system, including the transmission, the high tension transmission system, the induction motor, and which is the basis of all this. And so he supported, and with great success, because they together lit the Chicago exhibition in 1893, and by doing that, got the contract to develop Niagara Falls. This was a childhood wish of Tesla. Even when he was a child, when he was playing in his little brook near his home and making a little paddle. This is the story. I don't know whether to believe it or not, but he had got June bugs and stuck them to blades of a paddle wheel to make a paddle wheel go in his little stream. But he said even at that time that his dream was to harness Niagara Falls, which he got a chance to do, which was very nice. The actual, perhaps the beginning of the modern electrical age, I think appropriately should be in November 15th of 1896, and that was the date that they threw the switch in Niagara Falls to take the electricity that was being generated by Tesla patent generators and transport it to Buffalo, 26 miles away, on Tesla patent high tension wires. In the politics of the deal, Westinghouse got to build the generators, but GE got to build the transmission system on Tesla patents. And to light a light and to light or to run a electric motor in Buffalo. And I'm happy to say that Tesla's work in this was recognized, and I brought some reproductions of some posters that they had for a very nice centennial conference and celebration in 1996. I guess we want to talk a little bit, seeing that I'm not going to talk about radio at all. I'm in an area here where I don't think I can tell you anything new. However, in one of my briefcases, I do have Leland Anderson's monograph on Tesla's priority of the radio. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's quoting exactly what transpired in 1943. And I don't know if you're aware of how the trial, which was done before the Supreme Court of the United States, sounds very important, but that's just simply when you have a conflict in patents, it's settled at the Supreme Court level. I thought I'd speak about some anecdotes that maybe you hadn't heard, because I did meet Tesla at one time. You know, I mentioned before that Tesla was a very fastidious person, but this was appropriate for his time. He wrote with extreme clarity. In fact, let me just quote. Here's what a scientist and science writer, Brentano, spoke of when he was describing what is appropriate for, well, here he says, there are three aspects of Tesla's work which particularly deserve our admiration. The importance of the achievements in themselves is judged by their practical bearing, the logical clearness and purity of thought with which the arguments are pursued and new results obtained, the vision and inspiration, and I should say almost the courage of seeking remote things far ahead and so opening up new avenues to mankind. This was probably one of the aspects of Tesla's work that was brought so clearly, some of his inventions. But he was, as I mentioned before, a very fastidious person. He wrote clearly, he dressed very formally, he ate very carefully in the very best places. And those traits tend to indicate a person who's very, maybe very methodical or maybe cold. But he also had a lot of idiosyncrasies that were magnified a great deal. For instance, he didn't like pearls because there's something about the shape of pearls he didn't like. He was supposed to be so afraid of germs that he didn't like to shake hands. Well, let me say, when I was, and I don't remember the exact year, we used to go summer to the Jersey coast from Detroit. We lived in Detroit. Go to the Jersey coast for the summer and then come back either by stopping off a week or two in Washington or in New York or someplace. And so I don't know which year this was. I was about, I don't think I was 8, but 9 or 10 years old. And I was, had my heart set at that particular time of going to Radio City Music Hall. And my mother dragged me essentially to the New Yorker hotel where Tesla was. And as I said, he had this image of being very afraid of germs or cautious about, as they say, didn't care to shake hands with people. I don't know whether that was an affectation, maybe even a forethought affectation. But when I came in, of course, I'm his nephew's son, and his nephew's wife is there, and so he grabbed me and hugged me and kissed. I was very unhappy about all this and he patted me on the head, you know, and was talking to my mother, and I was just dumbfounded. I should have said, you know, give me your autograph and tell me some stories or something like that, and I probably just said, hello, yes sir, no sir, or something like that. I was just completely dumbfounded. But if he was so afraid of germs, he's picking the wrong place to hug and kiss and pat some 10-year-old kid who's got to be crawling with germs no matter how you got cleaned up before you went. So, another tale. He visited Detroit 2-3 times, but I was too young at that time to really know. But my father used to tell the stories. In Detroit, the finest hotel was the Book Cadillac Hotel. And Tesla was there, and my father and he decided to have a lunch in the middle of the day, just to have a lunch to talk over whatever it was. And so they went to the Book Cadillac Hotel, and at that time, I believe the cover charge for lunch, because they had music and everything else, I think it was about $2.50 a person. That'd be $5 for the two of them. And the cover, they got there at about 1:30, and I believe the cover was going to be lifted at 1:30. And my father said, being maybe a little more American than Tesla, oh, let's just wait. No, come in. So they went in, sat down, to heck, my dad's paying, so to heck with, to heck with these details. And then of course, when they saw there was Tesla, they came flocking. The maitre d' and the head waiter and the waiters came over to wait on whatever he wanted. No, what he wanted was a chafing dish, some milk, and some bread, and he was going to make his own bread and milk at the table himself, nobody else. Well, they were all terribly embarrassed about that, but that's what he wants, he can have that. So even in those days, we're talking now like 1932, 1933, not only when a dollar is a dollar, but when Tesla did not have really a lot of money. He had access. How he was able, people sometimes say he died poor. Well, he died in a 2-room suite in a first-class hotel in New York where he had lived for 10 years. And that isn't exactly dying poor, because even though he was skinny, it wasn't that he wasn't eating. He wasn't too interested in eating. He always had. He had many friends, particularly the Astors, who he lived in the Waldorf Astoria for 20 years, I think, and I don't think he ever was presented with a bill, though there's a question that they tore down his tower in Wardenclyffe as some way of settling part of this bill, but nobody had the nerve to ask him for money. And he, as I say, he had a number of famous, wealthy people who were seeing that he was able to live appropriately, let's put it that, appropriately, even if he was not rich. However, in 1936, which was his 80th birthday, the government of Yugoslavia gave him a honorarium of, I believe it was $7,500 a year, indefinitely. Unfortunately, indefinitely only went to 1941 because of the war, and the king ran for his life and everything else. But you have to understand that in 1936, $7,500 was, I have a Fortune magazine from about 1936 or 1937, and they are describing lifestyles in Manhattan of different sort of people, and $10,000 a year, you had a multi-room luxury apartment with live-in help. So that money goes a long way. So it wasn't that he was poor. It was that he did not have the money to carry on his laboratory, which is expensive, and he kept that laboratory going for a long time, and the money he needed for some of the really important inventions. I think maybe a couple other things. There's always been talk about whether Nobel was offered the Nobel Prize and turned it down. In fact, if you kind of look at what he did, he should have gotten 2 Nobel Prizes, because of one he certainly should have gotten for the alternating current, and the other one, Marconi in 1912 got the Nobel Prize. That should have been his, and that'd be just too embarrassing to give Tesla the Nobel Prize for the radio when they've already given it to Marconi. Supposedly in 1915, I believe it was, that it was reported in the New York Times, among other newspapers, that he had been offered the Nobel Prize to take it in jointly with Thomas Edison. And there was some discussion that he wouldn't take it because he didn't think Edison was worthy. Well, first, I don't believe that Thomas Edison was ever offered the Nobel Prize, because I don't know that what he did was worthy in the way that Nobel is. For inventing the photograph, is very nice, or for the stock ticker, or the movie machine. Those are all really good inventions, but they're not Nobel Prize level stuff. So I don't believe that there's any truth that there was an offer of the Nobel Prize to be taken with Thomas Edison. Second, Nobel Prizes are generally what they call vetted. In other words, they ask, if it's offered, would you take it? And if he said I can't believe that he would say no, he wouldn't take it. I don't believe that he was a hardy. I know he was mad because of the Nobel Prize to Marconi, but because he had a long drawn-out lawsuit with Marconi, which he lost. It was, I was going to get to why Marconi's patents were overturned. Okay, But I don't believe that Tesla was really offered the Nobel Prize at any time. It seems like a terrible oversight, particularly if you look at his work in alternating current. But so I think there's rumors that he turned down the Nobel Prize are part of the folklore of Tesla. Why did they overturn, after Tesla had lost the lawsuit with Marconi, which cost him a lot of money back in 1907 or whenever it was, how did it come to pass that they would overturn Marconi's patents? Well, Marconi made the mistake of asking the government for some substantial amount of money for use of Marconi patents that the government had used during the war, and he wanted a substantial amount of money. I think there were like 17 patents at the time. And the government then decided that under good analysis of the patents, that Tesla and Lodge and some other people had done previous work that invalidated Marconi's patents, and they weren't going to pay Marconi. That was the whole point. They said it's cheaper to beat him in court, which they did. He evidently prevailed on one patent, and they paid him $15,000 or $35,000 or something, a small fraction of what he was actually suing for. However, they didn't say, okay, we don't have to pay Marconi a couple $100,000 on his patents, we'll give that money to Tesla. No, they didn't say that. They said, we just made a bargain of not having any payment at all. So it was economically a good deal for them to fight this patent. There are a few other things, and I think maybe we'll open up for some questions if you wish. I have a couple items that I put down here. Why is the Tesla Museum in Belgrade? When Tesla died in January 1943, my father was the only relative who came to this country and became an American citizen, as Tesla did. He also was the only technical person in the family, because it was, as I say, it was a clerical family, and those that weren't clerical, they were in politics or in military or other things of that nature. But my father was, when Tesla died, my father was in Detroit, and this was 1943, the height of the war. Just by coincidence, another nephew of Tesla, a fellow by the name of Sava Kasanovic, who was like a brother with my father because they went to school in Budapest together and same age. He was on war assignment in New York City at the time. He was the head of resource allocation for the Balkans or some such title as that. He later became Yugoslav ambassador to the United States and Yugoslav ambassador to the United Nations right after the war. But he was on the site right in New York when Tesla died, and he took care of Tesla had a state funeral. I don't know, this is not an ordinary funeral. This is a state funeral in St. John the Divine Church in Manhattan. He took care of all that, settling Tesla's debts and packing up his personal belongings, because it was 1943. And Tesla had a lot of personal, he didn't keep them in his suite in the New Yorker hotel. He had storage places, and when summer came, he took his summer clothes out and put his winter clothes away. And he also never threw away a letter that was written to him. I think over 100,000 letters. And so all these were boxed up and put in storage under the protection of his nephew Sava Kasanovic. And my father then agreed that the material of Tesla's life then could be transported to Yugoslavia, because my father really didn't see that anybody in this country was going to do something, but in Yugoslavia they were immediately going to make a beautiful mansion in downtown Belgrade and devote that to Tesla and get the postgraduate people from the university to inventory and protect it properly. And so that's how it ended in Belgrade, and where it is today. The question is, did the American government ever plow through this and maybe take something out of it? Well, when Tesla died, he had a safe in his hotel room, and Slavko Sonovich and his secretary, and a locksmith, and it might have been the O'Neill or another newspaper person. The four of them went with the locksmith and opened the safe, and they inventoried what was in the safe. Among the things that he put in the safe was his naturalization papers. He was very proud that he had become an American citizen, and he put that in his safe. And he also he'd been sort of coerced to take an Edison medal at one time, which was a solid gold medal, and that was inventoried. And then after they inventoried the material that was in the safe, and because that was only a small fraction of his total belongings. In fact, you see that in the museum on this picture here in the museum, those are part of all his clothes are there. All his clothes were in box. I've been to the museum and looked at his winter suits and his summer suits and his hats. And some of the material is actually in display cases. Here is his top hat and gloves, and his straw hat and gloves and cane, and his alligator satchel and other things. Those were all brought. They preserved everything there, which is good in that respect. However, when and it was several years between the time that he died because of the war and the material. I think it was about 1950 when the property, in either 1950 or 51, the property was actually shipped to Belgrade. And when they opened the safe the second time, the Edison medal was gone. So even in his old age, he had made many statements about inventions that had military applications. He had these death rays, which you would now call Star Wars or something of that nature. So it seems reasonable that the FBI or the Army or somebody would go through his papers. Whether they took anything, hard to tell when you're talking about a couple 100,000 papers. Hard to tell if he took anything, but I don't know how many engineers, we should have all, if we not all engineers, engineering type people here. Scientific progress moves forward at a pretty good rate. And if he had something that was really proposed and brilliant in 1915, its military possibilities in 1943 they seem pretty remote. So I'm sure that they looked through the papers. Whether they took anything, I'm sure they copied down. They made copies of what they wanted. But I suppose that they returned the papers. So I don't think that the papers were necessarily rifled too much. We'll never know. There's a statue of Tesla at Niagara Falls, in Goat Island in Niagara Falls. That's one of three statues that were done by a very famous sculptor from Zagreb. The first one stands in front of the School of Electrical Engineering in Belgrade. The second one was the bicentennial gift of the people of Yugoslavia to the people of the United States. Countries all over the world gave gifts for the bicentennial, and that was the one they gave. It is the only statue of a personage in that national park. And before they had, and it was very difficult to get it there because they did not want statues of people there, but they broke the rule for Tesla. The third one was placed in Gospic, which is the county seat of Lika, the county in which Tesla was born. And I had the honor, I guess, to go and dedicate that. I thought I was going to dedicate it with maybe one or two other people, but every politician in all of Yugoslavia turned up. And there were so many that we had to go up in pairs to dedicate the statue. And it was, unfortunately, that statue, because of the war in 1991, that was destroyed. I have some friends that were there, and I have pictures now. Some drunken Croat militiamen took a bazooka to it and blew it up. I can't believe, because nobody in Croatia was more important than Tesla. And he had to be drunk, or just simply crazy mad. I wanted to mention just a couple things. First, if you don't mind, I'm going to, because Lee de Forest, I know that there was a lot of controversy about Lee de Forest, but he certainly created a lot of things. And he was very gracious in saying how he owed his career to Tesla. And I'll read what he said. He did this, that he wrote in 1931 for Tesla's 75th birthday. And you all know what Leda Forst did. I mean, he did these radio amplifiers and telephone amplifiers and triode. I don't know if you all agree about the triode, but he's given credit for the triode. He said, "No one so excited my youthful imagination, stimulated my inventive ambition, or served as an outstanding example of brilliant achievement in the field I was eager to enter, as did yourself. Not only for the physical achievement of your researches on high frequencies, which laid the basic foundations of the great industry of radio transmission in which I have labored, but for the incessant inspiration of your early writings and your example, do I owe you a special debt of gratitude." A good recommendation. Tesla had, besides the marvelous scientific things that he did, he was a person of a very broad personality. Instead of being cold and methodical, he had I know from the parallel with my father, he had a sense of humor. He had Mark Twain as a close friend, and I think you have to have a sense of humor. Maybe somewhat warped, but he had to have a sense of humor to be associated. And he was associated with many other people, so I'm sure that he had. I know my father used to tell stories from his childhood, and he could never finish the story because even though I heard it 30 times, he would start laughing so hard in the middle of the story that he couldn't complete the story. And I know that Tesla was telling the same kind of stories. He had this beautiful cultural background. He actually translated into English Serbian poems and songs, and he had a method of getting them published, which was good because of his friends in the publishing business. So it meant that he really was a person of considerable breadth. I'd say just close by saying I'm the now executive secretary. I've been one of the founding directors of the Tesla Memorial Society. That was started in the Niagara Falls area in 1979, and so we've been at this for 20 years. The amount of recognition for Tesla, and we've had some small part to add to this, but the amount of recognition from around the bicentennial has been really remarkable because he was so famous at one time. Our society sponsored the publication of what's called the Tesla Collection. It is a collection of all the newspaper accounts that referred to Tesla or things that he wrote, both in the popular press and in scientific journals, from 1885, when the first thing that he wrote was published, a technical piece, through 1920. We stopped at 1920 because the copyrights start after 1920. The number of pages in this collection is 4,500. And nothing repeated, nothing repeated. Only each different article, because many of these articles were distributed around the world. They appeared in France and England and were translated. They appeared in newspapers throughout the breadth of this country. At that time, there were, I think, 9 newspapers in New York, and so all the morgues of all those 9 newspapers were plowed to get this collection. So you can see the fame that he had. However, and he kept, his name recognition was very good until he died. After he died, you know, the country was involved in a war and moving on to other things, and other technology was coming up. His name did fall into disuse. People of Yugoslav background never gave up. They treated him, as I say, like an icon. But it was only around 1975, 1976 that the technical people again were reminded of what he had done and the immensity of what he had done. And so there have been, during his lifetime, he was honored many times, how many doctorates he was given and what have you, but more recently, as I said, he was given credit at Niagara Falls. The IEEE gives the Tesla medal every year. for power engineering, and not for radio, but for power engineering, and so forth. And so I have some material here that I'm happy to, if anybody wants a copy. We make videos as well. We've sold 15,000, about 15,000 of these videos. I wrote and narrated the first two versions, and the producer, one of our members, one of our executive board members, he wanted to, every time he had something new, he wanted to put it in, and I said, his name is Lubo. I said, Lubo, you can't do that. You can't keep changing something under the same name. And every time he changed something, I would have to re-narrate the entire thing because of you cannot edit in narration, because the levels, you can never get, we have good equipment, but you can never get the levels right. So you have to make a new sound thing. After I did that the second time, and he did it 2 more times, he got some professional fellow to do the narration, but I still wrote the stuff. And incidentally, if you're interested in buying these, I have some. They are available, and I have some other material. And I want to, I think on the bulletin board in some place is the address of our society, which is right here in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. Our executive secretary, from the beginning of the society until last summer, he finally died, and the society was based at that time, and I moved it to our house. We are a nonprofit, and non-professional in that respect, non-professional. We don't pay for anything. This is why we are 20 years and going to be another 20 years, while International Tesla Society in Colorado Springs, which was doing very nicely, they decided to pay people to do work, and next thing you know, they were bankrupt. So we do everything. Pardon?
You have a web page?
It's on my schedule. When I took over this, that's one of the principal things that I said I wanted to do. You know, I was in international telecommunications, and I'm sort of a Luddite in this respect, because when I worked for RCA, I set up the data services for RCA, including the services that carried the first part of the net, and I went on to and I set up facsimile services and regular data services, and then our part of RCA, which was bought by GE, was sold to MCI International, and I worked there, and I set up their facsimile, and I don't have facsimile myself, and I'm not connected to the net. I think now, and I worked for a mainframe computer company in 1959. Listen, the computer that you pay now $55 for that fits in your breast pocket, we had 2 full bays of equipment to do the same, and didn't do it as well, and cost about $100,000. So anyway, we have, I have some material here that shows what we have to sell. If you want to buy something like this, I'm fine. I'm not a salesman, so it's just available. And I haven't reopened the membership rules yet, because that is a difficult thing. I have to get set with outside people. Web page is what I want to do. And I think that's how we want to keep the society going. I know we're on 75 different web pages right now. I have calls that are coming in. They have my name and telephone number and everything, and I don't like to give out the telephone number too much, because it's bad enough with the mail that comes in, but I'm getting calls all the time. And if we have a web page, how I'd like to handle it is I'd like to have people ask questions on the web page. I would sort out the ones I want to answer and answer them on the web page, and get a outside operator. That's why we sold this through Barnes and Noble. They sold 10,000 of these themselves, and about 4 or 5 different distributors have sold them.
How much are they?
$20. Write a check for the Tesla Memorial Society, and then when Uncle Sam comes later, you can say, I won't tell you what you can say. Don't give me any cash. Anyway, I really want to conclude that. I'm going to read one more thing. This is sort of over the top recommendation for Tesla, and I like it because it doesn't hold any no rain on this at all. This was by the science editor and publisher Hugo Gernsback, who published a lot of Tesla stuff. And he said, if you mean the man who really invented, in other words, originated and discovered, not merely improved what already had been invented by others, then without a shade of doubt, Nikola Tesla is the world's greatest inventor, not only at present, but in all history. His basic as well as revolutionary discoveries for sheer audacity have no equal in the annals of the intellectual world. And I say, I'm going to hang. Now, I take questions. I'm better at answering questions. Yes, this is my automotive friend here.
I want to first thank you for the privilege of allowing me to get closer to Tesla the man than I ever thought possible. I have one embarrassing observation to make and another question right after. The embarrassing thing is I surveyed my kids before I came here, and I grabbed a bunch of other high school kids, and I asked them who Nikola Tesla was, and only one of my 4 kids knew. And
you're way ahead.
And well, he's a biomedical engineer. And probably if you got 1,000 American kids from high school, and probably most from college around now, and asked who Thomas Edison was or Albert Einstein, they would all know. They won't know Nikola Tesla, and that's unfortunate. The second thing is, did not Tesla work on a means of using the Earth, the entire world, as a transmitter or a conductor for communications? And I never understood how that worked.
Well, neither do I. But let me say a couple things about this. Yes, this was one of his really most interesting possibilities. He was going to use the Earth like a conductor and to be able to. In fact, this is one of the reasons why J.P. Morgan said this guy is dangerous, because he gave the impression that you could stick some sort of tap into the powers anywhere in the world and draw out all the power you needed. He even said, well, it will cost a lot of money to establish these taps, but after that, the energy is free. And I guess Morgan said, where do you put the meter? And it made Tesla kind of dangerous. Unfortunately, most of these ideas, they were partly associated with this project that he had on Shoreham, the Wardenclyffe project with that tower. That was part of it. You know, that tower was 186 feet high or something like that. It also was over 100 feet into the ground. And that basis was not just for stability or anything. It was in order to get down to some solid place for the resonance, I guess he was looking for. In fact, right now in the company, the Peerless Photo area that's out there, the tower is gone, but the foundation is still there, and the supports of the foundation, and the tunnel is still there, but it was what you call attractive nuisance, and no company can have an attractive nuisance, and they just filled it in with rubble. So if there are plans to try and make a park, a technical park and technical museum in that area, and if they did that and had control of this thing, they could take all that rubble out and have that base. Who knows if there's water level in there or not? I have no idea, but it's there and it's available. Yes.
They are going to address sort of semi-criticism of O'Neill, in which he was a little over exuberant in some of his stories about him. And I think there was questions about the vibration of his vibrator that could fit in a vest pocket and knock down 4 blocks of New York.
One of the questions that came up on this radio interview I did a couple of days ago, and he said, did Tesla cause that Siberian explosion? And this is part of this sort of folklore of Tesla, because he supposedly had this thing. There's all sorts of stories. I'm sure that one of the things that Tesla was, he was not a great mathematician. He was a decent mathematician, but not a great mathematician, but he was a great thinker. My father was much the better mathematician. In fact, he used to refer to my father as my nephew, the mathematician. And I didn't even, when I went to Yugoslavia, I didn't even recognize we were talking about my father because I never thought of my father as a mathematician at all. He was a mechanical engineer. But Tesla supposedly, as I say, he understood about vibration. He was able, in that dark ages that he worked in, to predict the natural resonance of the Earth within like 10%, of which, you know, is like, I don't know if it's Archimedes or not, that predicted or calculated the circumference of the Earth in ancient Greek times simply by, you know, using a little thought there, figuring out what the curvature is over a certain known distance. He evidently did invent some sort of resonating thing, and he got a lot of publicity about it because he says that he turned it on in his laboratory and the building started shaking, and the owner of the building or the superintendent came running and said, turn it off because the stuff is, plaster's falling down all over the place, and so on and so forth. And there's even more fanciful stories than that. But because he had that reputation, when that meteor hit in Siberia in 1908 or whenever it was, they figured, ask Tesla about this. Did he do this? But I think everybody agrees it was some sort of meteor. Here, I have a question over here.
I'm going to try to combine like about 8 questions.
All right.
One question, so it doesn't look like I'm
hogging it here. Okay.
But now, when you look at the technical works and the patents, and you look at it either as a technical person or as a scientist, and you forget the man, you can see the genius thing. And the thing you said about clarity is amazing. I'm not that. I can read the patents, and I mean, they're very, very planned out and very easy to follow. I agree with that. But unfortunately, because of the news media, and perhaps Nikola Tesla did have a few idiosyncrasies. If you go to something like a non-Tesla authorized meeting, okay, all the Roswell stuff comes in. You know,
Perpetual motion, yes.
That it was all this stuff still could work. But there's a government conspiracy, for, you know, because they don't want free energy and things like that. And basically, just like Einstein, I mean, with the special relativity, that's fudge factor. You know, they said, well, it was one of his mistakes. But and Tesla, in some cases, did make a couple of things that perhaps weren't at the time, and even now, they didn't have the technology to really prove that it couldn't work, like transmission of energy through standing wave. I mean, there's a physical problem with that, okay? But the idea was perhaps good. But all his other works were Is there a problem? Does society have a problem with that? I mean, you know, the deal with, he said that he heard signals from Venus and Mars. And he said, unless somebody misquoted him, and we'll never know for sure.
No, he said that. He said that, and what he had heard is a phenomena that is pretty well understood now. And it's the signals that come from outer space. I don't know if they come from black holes or some sort of pulsars, yeah. And they come with a certain regularity that sounds like they are intelligent. And he evidently perceived this at some point and made maybe a outrageous idea that they had come from. But you have to understand, in 1900, when he was talking about this, people were talking very seriously about the ancient Martians who had lived there and dug all these beautiful canals. And so there was, in the popular press, was a lot of discussion of that. It didn't help him any, I don't think, in looking back on his life. At the time, I don't think it hurt him at all.
In fact, well, I don't know if the books that were written about Tesla, they said that his colleagues really got.
Yeah, let me work on that on that question a little bit. There is a lot of discussion that Tesla worked through the popular press rather than through the regular scientific journals, and that he was somewhat shunned by the established hierarchy, yes. I used to say that at one time because he did get such popular press reception. But he was the vice president of the IRE 2 times. He presented more serious papers and of higher level papers than almost anybody else in science of that time. Because, as I say, he had such a wide-ranging mind. He put papers, it's just debatable that he invented the X-ray. He was working on other things at the time with the X-ray, but he's very graciously congratulated Röntgen on the X-ray. But he presented papers on that, and in fact, some of the papers that he presented were those papers that defeated Marconi, because even though he didn't publish, but he mentioned, and when Tesla mentioned, it was almost tantamount to being published, because it was picked up. So he really was not an outsider. It was just that it seems that there was a certain jealousy, but I don't think it affected him. He really was working within the scientific medium. Unfortunately, or fortunately, he also worked in the public medium. And he did publish a lot of things because he had friends. If you read his articles that he wrote, My Inventions and things of that sort, the clarity of that writing is so fantastic, because it was not written on a scientific basis. It was written on a popular basis. So he was able to explain things that he was doing on a popular basis. Yeah, I probably didn't get it, but I just move on, and I'll get there next. Yes.
Some time ago, I think I remember reading that Tesla won his Supreme Court on the radio patents that he had developed because the judges found that he had a ground circuit at Balkan. Could you speak to that?
He did win, but he died. The decision came down after he died. He died in January 1943. The decision came down in June, and he did not participate in that. All the material about priority of the radio is from his lawsuit with Marconi. This monograph that I mentioned before about priority of the radio was from the lawsuit, because he gave long depositions concerning this thing, and it was very close whether he would win or Marconi would win. But the difference was that he had not put down in the conventional lab books, record books, his priority. He had spoken of them. And his patents, he had the patents, but Marconi also had patents. And as I say, I think there were 15 patents or 17 patents that were disputed by the federal government, or I think it was the Navy, actually, that took the case to court. And Marconi only persevered on one. And the rest were thrown, but not only for Tesla, but for Lodge and for other people as well, but principally for Tesla. And they included things that in the lawsuit, things that Tesla had said way in advance of anything Marconi had done. Let me get the question over here.
Terbo, you didn't mention anything about the ballasted transformer that he was instrumental in inventing to do with fluorescent lighting. I think it's a phenomenon of what it comes to.
It's an area of his inventiveness, and I mentioned that he was in he came in 1884, I think it was about 1886, that they started the Tesla Electric Company, which was for arc lighting. And I think this ballast, and that was part of the package at that time. He got nothing out of that, and the company itself sold a lot of stock, and somebody got the money, and God knows where they went. But yes, he had a fantastic breadth of patents, and his work in arc lighting is really fundamental. But because it isn't as important as some of the other things he did, and because he lost control of that, it isn't recognized quite so much. Here's a question over here.
I read where he had his shows in his laboratory after dinner at the theater and like Mark Twain and and he was showing and demonstrating this plasma ball and light.
Yeah, I actually, you know, this ball lightning, this has always been a, I don't know how many people, does everybody understand what ball lightning is? At first, it's almost impossible to create in any size or repeatability, even now. And I've known people who have risked their lives trying to do it. But what I didn't realize, when I was in college, and I was living in a professor's house, and there was a heck of a rainstorm, and I had the second floor of his house, and my mother happened to be visiting me for a week or something at that time, and she was sitting on one side of a galvanized sort of kitchen table that I had, and I was on the other side, and we had the window open this much. And in Indiana, I went to Purdue. In Indiana, they have some real thunderstorms. I've been hit by lightning myself so many times, people think you've never been hit. All you do is drive a car in Indiana in a rainstorm and go over the crest of a hill, and you'll be hit by lightning, and you won't be able to see it, but you'll feel the hair go up on your neck. And we were sitting there in this big rainstorm, and because it was warm, we had the window open this much, and sure enough, down the drain pipe, evidently I couldn't see, came to the ledge, ball lightning about the size of a large grapefruit. It squeezed through that place, paused at the edge of the sill, fell down onto this table. My mother was, for once, speechless. I, being an engineer and a scientist, I was already in my 5th year, so I wasn't exactly budding scientist. I watched it slowly, like a water-filled balloon, undulating a little bit and hissing and red and almost, not transparent, but you could see inside it. And it just slowly rolled across the table. There's a little lip at the end, and I was seriously thinking about putting my finger in that thing to see what was going to happen. However, like any good engineer, you don't bust anything first. You see what you're doing, and then you work it. And so before I had the chance to do anything, it came to the edge of the table, and I thought, okay, it's going to fall off the edge onto the floor. And I was interested to see what's going to break into little pieces or what. It didn't. It got to the edge, and it hopped over to a metal dish cabinet. It hit it. I wrote a paper on it. Later on, I found out how rare this was, what I had seen, and to have a technical way of describing it. It was like somebody took a Louisville slugger and slugged that cabinet. It made such a racket. Bang! It just jumped about 2 feet over the thing, and the only thing I could see that all the hinges had black soot around them. Didn't do any damage to anything. And what was funny is that the professor's wife was in the john directly below with her window open like this. And while she was admiring herself there, it came down, did the same, another ball of a similar size came down, but there was no table to fall. There was only this bathtub. And it fell from and hit the bathtub with the same report. You know, like somebody hit the darn thing with a Louisville slugger. Well, fill in yourself. Fill in the rest. Okay.
How much time did it take between where you spotted it at the window and it went across the table?
A number of seconds. I can't say 30 seconds, but certainly more than 5 or 6 seconds. I had to I was at a party with a bunch of people I didn't know, and I saw, trying to mix a little bit, and I saw some people standing over near the foot of the stairway with drinks, and I heard the word ball lightning. And so I went over there and said, oh yeah, I know about ball lightning. And the guy put his drink down and got his notebook. He'd been writing a paper, and he told me about all the people that had seen ball lightning and how unreliable they were. You know, some of these ball lightning were the size of beach balls, and some of them did this and some did that, and it was not really good. He followed. When he did that, then I decided, okay, I'll write a paper on it too, because I did. But popular, not serious.
Tesla produced ball lightning.
He In some of the Tesla coil lightnings, you can see small balls, but I don't think they qualify. What you want to do, I had a fellow, Bob Golka, who risked his life a number of times. He designed the largest Tesla coil ever in Wendover Air Force Base there. And he actually, with a suit on, went out there. You know this picture? This picture. This is a double exposure. Tesla isn't stupid. One picture sitting there, next picture with the thing, put them together. But Bob Golka actually went out there in a suit that he thought was going to protect him, and a larger, his Tesla coil was larger than this. It was the largest ever built. And I have seen the motion picture that he took of that thing, and he started getting hit by some of these bolts, even in his suits. He almost was killed. He also was trying he had a contract from the Air Force or somebody to try to make ball lightning, and he was trying to do it with railroad engines for some reason, and the speed had something to do with it. He had to, you can't do it. I'm sure that they're going to be able to make ball lightning at some point, but God if I know when. Okay, I got a question over here.
Ball lightning, something like brimstone?
Yeah.
Are there any connection?
Well, I have no idea, but I'm told that I did very wise thing not putting my finger in it. Yes.
I've heard Tesla's name in connection with supposedly a Navy story early in World War II about the U.S. Eldridge strike when the ship disappeared. And there's a gentleman that's appearing periodically, claims to have been a survivor of that ship.
That's a Philadelphia story that, yeah.
That's used Tesla's name. Is there any connection with that?
Among the people who are interested in Tesla are Slavic people, Serbs and Yugoslavs and what have you, that have one way of treating Tesla. Scientific people, real scientific people, have another way of treating Tesla. We talked about the people that are interested in perpetual motion. They have another way of... You have both pseudoscience and parascience and pseudoscience. And he's very popular in those things because he said a lot of things that they hang their hat on. And they're also a group in California that are absolutely... and they have a convention every year, and they include me on their mailing list. So they got pictures of them, weird people. They say that Tesla was not born, that he came from Venus, and he didn't die, he went back to Venus. It's a big operation in Southern California, surprisingly enough, Southern California. And they have a convention, and that Grand Witchess or Duchess or whatever she is that's ahead of you, she's getting older now, but she's still got her hair like she's 21. And if you wanted to know what happened to all the really big cars from 1955, they are evidently owned by these people who are driving them around to these conventions. So this idea of the Philadelphia story, I'm sure that Tesla's blamed for it. Yeah. Yes.
So it's been said that Tesla invented the digital computer almost 100 years ago. How could that possibly be true?
He invented the AND gate. And there is a big publication out right now, which is just, I wrote the foreword to it, or not the foreword, I wrote the jacket blurb for it. Because, as I say, I worked at it sounds much more than it was. In 1959, I worked for a mainframe computer company, but I wasn't inventing computers. But it's true that he invented the AND gate. And it is really fundamental. And the other fellow who wrote for the blurb for the jacket is a fellow who used to be the science director of the IEEE, and now he's the general secretary or whatever comparable thing for the Computer Association. And he wrote, and he said, you know, to me, I'm kind of surprised, but I got a copy of this book, and before I wrote the blurb, I read a little bit of it. It's kind of technically beyond me, but I read a little bit of it, and Tesla's diagrams are right there for AND gate. And that's the connection with computer. Now I'm going to give somebody else.
Well,
Oh, nobody else? Okay, you inherit.
there was AWA convention, Interworld Association convention, and they talked about, well, they think they had found one of Tesla's original prototypes, so we won't go into that. But in it, they had done, a couple of professors had done some work for a commercial concern that wanted and used high voltage Tesla coils, similar to ones that a little more powerful, and they did create ball lightning, and there were actually pictures of it, so it has been indeed created.
Yeah, it has, but some of the, for the length of time, you know, what was interesting about this is that we're talking about substantial amount of time that this thing, and it was just like it was a, pardon? Oh, it hissed. That's probably what kept me from putting my finger in it. It hissed. It was not transparent at all. It was very deep red, but plasma. You could see it was plasma. But it had real good, more or less circular form, and it kept together. No, not at all. No, you know, like a balloon filled with water. In other words, it undulated a little bit, like it had weight. But I don't think, from what I understand of the plasma, the weight is inconsequential. But when it fell off the windowsill, only fell about 4 inches onto the table. And from then, it seemed to be kind of undulating a little bit, but not much. And I couldn't tell, you know, that's the one thing I can't remember now of whether it skidded across or whether there was enough form to see it were rolling, but it moved very slowly because there was almost no tilt to the table. And then there was a little lip on the end of the table like you have to contain spills and things. And it really came to a stop there. And so I had time to think. And so I actually looked like this to see what happens when it hits the floor. And it didn't. From there, it just paused, and then it hopped almost instantaneously to the other cabinet. Oh yeah, it was a complete metal. It was a metal, what do you call it, porcelain, metal porcelain. The table was metal porcelain, the cabinet was metal porcelain. And it hopped over there, and as I say, the only thing I saw, I thought, my God, it has done something real damage. Opened the door and everything, only around there were 3 hinges. It was a tall thing, about this tall. And just around all 3 hinges was black soot, which wasn't there before. Pardon?
What happened when it hit the door? Did it
Disappeared. No, nothing more. That was it. Whatever energy was in it was what that, when I said it had a sound like a Louisville slugger. A full swing, though.
Was there a bang? Was there a noise when it went?
Tremendous. Oh, you mean when it hit the thing? Tremendous noise. I described it as taking a full swing with a Louisville slugger at that cabinet. It was, I mean, it was a big noise. Yeah.
Tesla's coil, I believe, was running around 30 kilohertz or so.
I can forget
Do you have
now.
any idea what it was? And what did this other fellow do? What did he do? He did use the vibrator at first to produce his oscillations.
You know, that's an area of the technology that other people are handling very well, and I don't follow it at all. However, I do have some experience with Tesla coil, because when we had a conference in Colorado Springs, and they were going to have a demonstration, they always had demonstration with Tesla coil. They brought a nice big one. It was stood about 6 feet tall. And they fired the darn thing up, and the sparks started coming out, you know, and then there's somebody there with, whereas usually you put thimbles on your fingers so that you don't get burned, and we're drawing these things. But it jumped to the, either the ventilator or to the fire thing. And it triggered the entire fire in the hotel. It was one of these really good hotels, and every metal door went closed throughout the entire hotel, blocked everything off, because that was the last time they ever shot it indoors. They always took it outdoors.
When I built, I could strike a fluorescent bulb, and it would be good for about 10, 15 feet before it got the what you call oscillations. And they would get that far out. But I use this an 806 tube for.
You see, I'm more interested in automobiles. Okay, any more questions? And I take a couple more, and then we'll go give the gentleman here.
As a source of information on Tesla, as a book, who has given the most definitive?
This right here, Tesla by Margaret Cheney. She incidentally when I started reorganizing the society, I've known her for a long time. She wrote that book before there was a big market for it, and it's been in several reprints now. I think this is one of the copies that was done by Barnes & Noble.
CHA anyway?
Yeah, it's on my list here, and if you're interested, and I have copies at home. I have even the softcover copies at home. That is the best one. However, she's just finished writing. There is a Nova program on television had a program on Edison.
This is a Dorset Press.
Then maybe that's an older one. I don't know which is. They're reprinting them regularly, both hardcover and softcover. And she's just with a filmmaker in Washington by the name of Robert Uth. Together, she's the author, but he has all the photos and things. They put a larger format book that is just now published by Barnes & Noble and should be in their stores. At least you can order it. And I forget the name of it now, but it's got Tesla prominently in the name. I don't even know what it cost. She doesn't know what it cost. She got a copy of it, but it didn't say how much it cost. Wait a second. I want to say one. Well, no, we don't. I don't have that. They printed just 15,500 copies first run, and Barnes & Noble printed it, and it's going to be available at Barnes & Noble because that's where they normally is. But if you're talking, that's more of a picture book. This is probably the best of the biographies of Tesla. This Man Out of Time by Margaret Cheney.
Did you say you have that in paperback?
I have that in paperback, and I'll give you a piece of someplace here.
Oh, okay, I'll get it later.
I don't know where did I leave it back there? Yeah, someplace. I thought I took it out, and maybe I did take it out. Someplace around here I have it, and I'll give you whoever wants the copies of it.
Yeah.
Can we mail order?
Yeah.
Give you our address, we can send a check and get it.
I'll give you the thing, and then you send the check, and I'll send whatever. But I brought some copies of this along. If you want to get the video, I've got some copies that I brought along. I didn't bring a lot of other stuff, but I brought the list of things that I have available. I don't like to do that, and I resisted doing it for a year. But I said, heck, we got all this stuff. Why not get rid of some of it? And for that, I have. No, it's wrong. Thank you, sweetheart. I have it over on this side. He never married. That's how come I'm the closest relative. If you had said I was his grandson, I would have to say, yeah, please. No, I tell you about his family. He was in the Serbian his father was a Serbian Orthodox priest. You see, in Serbian Orthodox Church, you can rise to the rank of like petty bishop, what's called proto-presbyter, and be married. If you want to rise higher, which is called archimandrite, that is like the archimandrites decide who's going to be the patriarch. It's the highest rank you can go, and you're generally celibate at that rate. So all these priests are married as opposed to Catholic Church. Tesla, his father was a priest and his mother was a typical woman. She came from probably the most famous family of the Austro-Hungarian Serbs, who rose to rank of field marshal in the Austrian army, which is really amazing. But they had 5 children. They had the oldest son, who normally would be the priest, and he died at 13 years old. Then the father was after Nikola to become a priest, but he didn't want to become a priest. He hadn't been thinking about that, and his mother sort of supported him. And then had three sisters besides. And so all 3 sisters married Serbian Orthodox priests. One married my grandfather by the name of Trbojevich, and that's how the line comes to me. Yes?
They never got a recording of his voice.
I worked with Jack Haley Jr. Productions. They were making what is that thing? Believe It or Not? Is that the program they had? Ripley's Believe It or Not or something. They were making a program on Tesla, and I was working with their researchers giving them family pictures and things of that sort, and they looked everywhere. No photos, no motion picture, and no recorded voice, as opposed to Edison, who was, because of his connection with both of those things, was ubiquitous. Yes?
In Margaret Cheney's book, there's a...
That is not Tesla.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know who it is. He's an engineer. He's an engineer at, I worked at RCA, and when they did an article on me at RCA, they dug that picture up, and you know, and I said, here's why this is not Tesla. First, he's in the back. Tesla is not going to be in the back. Second, Tesla was, I never thought him as good looking, but my wife tells me that he's very handsome, and that fellow is abusing the privilege of he looks like Ross Perot with his ears sticking out and what have you. And he's also, unless he's standing in a hole, he's too darn short, because Tesla was, I don't know, 6'4" or something like that, very tall. But everybody, you know, my father, I went to this area where they were born. My father was born in the same area, just a few miles away. Serbs in that area are all 6'2". I'm just average height there. I was 6'3", just average. I hardly saw anybody under 6 feet. But when you went to Belgrade and saw Serbs in Belgrade, they were very tall and thin in Lika. In Belgrade, they were much huskier and not so tall. That's what happens in being separated because of Ottoman Empire being separated for 300 years. The Darwin at work. Okay, anything else? Here's one question here. I'll continue answering questions, but everybody else can jump up and leave. Yeah.
Just a quick question. With the war, the upheavals had in the Balkans, did it affect the museum or any of the artifacts that are over there? Do you know?
The museum was not hit. They sent a email to a whole number of senators and what have you. The director, of course, I obviously know these people from the way back. He sent an email saying, watch where you're throwing these bombs, because we're only 300 meters from the television building, which they did bomb. And I understand if there was any damage at all, it was simple damage like cracked plaster or something of that nature, but no, and is very lucky because it's, this mansion is really pretty much downtown. Don't walk there. It's more than a walk, but it's not that far. Anything else?
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.